Good evening and welcome to Preparation and Practice. What is preparation and practice? What are you supposed to do when you're preparing for a speech? Do you just come up here and start talking for 10 to 15 minutes? Do you just wake up and say, I think I'm going to Toastmasters. I'm just going to go see what happens. If you do that, you're going to suffer. It's going to be a bad day. You're going to be stressed. And over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I hope to give you a few strategies, a few tips, just a few things that I've done over the last couple of years as I've grown my communication abilities with the intent on helping each of you out tonight. So you guys just sit back. Let me see some smiles. I see Dan's already partially smiling. I can't really tell. And we'll go from there. So what is it? When I start thinking about a speech or a presentation, my mindset really thinks about what do I need to do? What are all the things I need to consider? And when I do that, I think of the whole picture. Even if I've never spoken at the location before, I start thinking about lighting, sound, electronics, video, the people in the room. That's all the things I start looking at before I sometimes even think about the speech. Because what people don't realize is that presentations are more than words. When you're giving a presentation, you're just not coming up here to say, "Hi, my name is Michael Laitler. Hi, my name's Jay McKinney. You know what? I'm doing this presentation on preparation and practice." Rather, you come here with energy. You start thinking about how can I move through the room? What kind of video do I have? What kind of audio do I have? What do I need to make this more of an experience versus just a speech? A few things, and we'll start from the beginning, is lectern and audience location. You guys notice whenever I speak, I don't use the lectern very much. Now, that doesn't mean that you're always supposed to move the lectern out of the way. If you're giving a presentation that's a lot of facts and statistics, you need the lectern because you're not going to remember 20% of this, a third of that, how to say someone's name right, all their biography of somebody else's. So it's good to have the lectern. However, when you're giving presentations that are kind of free-flowing, so to speak, where you need to move around, or you're doing motivational speaking, or you're doing something that you really know that you personally wrote, move things out the way. Just clear your space. Figure out how much space you need in order to make the best presentation possible. Then think about your audience. Where are they seated? In our room this evening, everybody's seated right up front. We only have 6 people. Now let's say you're speaking in front of 100. How's the room set up? Are you just standing on a podium? Or are you standing just on a stage? Or is it going to be open? Is there a stage running between everybody? Are you going to use that to your advantage? Or are you just going to sit up tight up in the top of the stage and just stand there? You have to think about that when it comes to your presentation. Or if you're in a smaller room where it's a round table, are you going to walk through the middle, kind of like a U shape? Those are all the things to start thinking about as you prepare for your speech. Next thing is microphone. Once again, think about it. You're in a big room, 100, 200, 1,000 people. Do you think you have the voice to project to that person all the way in the back? If not, microphones, lapel mics, handheld mics, whatever kind of, some that just hang over the ear. Start thinking about that the bigger the room. But if it's a small room, do I need to really get a microphone when it's only a few of us with minimal noise? A closed room like this, you really don't need much in order to project your voice, in order for people to hear you and understand what you're saying. Room conditions. Go back to lighting. Is it a dark room? Is it a bright room? If you're not careful, you have the wrong lighting after lunch. And what happens? Those carbs kick in. Those carbs kick in a lot. And you have to pay attention to that. Is a room in a location where there's a lot of foot traffic? Do you need to close the doors? You got to think about all of that in preparation for your presentation because all of those affect how well people are going to listen to you. Is it cold? Is it warm? What are all the little things that you're thinking about? Is the windows open? Is somebody going to start looking out the window saying, "Oh, look, this car's going up and down 165"? You got to start thinking about all of that before your presentation. Next, visual aids. Does your presentation require a PowerPoint? Does it require some kind of mood music? Does it require some kind of hype music? Do you need a controller? I mean, what do you need? Do you need a flip chart? If you're doing a motivational speech, you probably don't need a flip chart. But if you're giving something that's instructional, educational, like tonight's session, this helps out. This gives a reinforcement to your words. Because you got to think about it. When you're dealing with adult learners, there's three main types: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. We're not going to do kinesthetic because I don't know if you're touching me right now. But we're going to do audio, visual. Yeah, go. I don't want Jay coming to tap me and poke me on the chest. Is he real? Yeah, he's real. Yeah, he's real. But that's something to think about. If you're going to think about kinesthetics, have handouts. Sometimes people like to write things down. It might be one of those presentations. I went through these already. Just become aware of your area. Microphones, group of 100. I don't want to spend too much time on this part. Rehearsing the speech. Whew. How many people rehearse their speech? Thank you, Jay. I just want at least 2 or 3 people. Thank you. Rehearsing your speech is very important. And one of the things I talked about in my introduction was, in preparation for the speech contest, essentially I was forced to prepare because I used that same speech through 5 different levels. Thus, I presented it 5 different times. And what I learned is every time I presented, I became better. What does that tell me about future presentations? The more I practice, the better I become. And that can be done in a multitude of ways. One, your phone. How many of us have phones? Even Eric, even a new guy, so that's good. Record yourself. It's going to feel weird. Trust me, it feels very weird to record yourself. Whether it's just doing the audio or pull up your video, set up on a tripod, or put it on a desk or something like that and have it face you. And then you can see the mannerisms and the way you move throughout your presentation. And you really learn a lot about yourself once you see yourself on video. That's why I do so much video, because I was challenged last year to start doing that. And ever since that time, I've learned how I move, where I'm standing at during certain points. Am I coming close to the audience when I need to? Am I stepping back? And you learn all of that through video. Another way, write down your speeches ahead of time. I used to, when I first started speaking, I used to handwrite all my speeches out, word by word, every single word. 5-minute speech, 3 to 4 sheets of paper, word by word. And I would start to memorize it, which turned into internalizing. But it was my method of learning what I was doing, because I had to do a lot of content creation. And that was my way of putting all my thoughts together. Now, do you have to do that? No. But is it helpful? It can be. I know other people, when I talk to them, they're like, I'm not writing nothing down. I'm just going to write down my bullet points and that's all I need. And that's fine. If that works for you, do it. But I always recommend doing something in a written form, whether it's writing word for word, doing an outline, or at least just drawing something on the board in order for you to learn what you're speaking. And sometimes, if you're giving a long speech, it's a little tough to write every word out if you're giving a 30-minute speech. I mean, I've done it before, and it's probably about 15 to 20 pages of writing. But it was the beginning stages. So for those that are just kind of starting out at public speaking, or you're communicating in front of groups, or you have that weekly meeting with your team, you have a board meeting, those are all things to think about. Should I write my speech out ahead of time? How do I want to look? Am I always nervous? That little bit of preparation before you go into that meeting goes a far way. That little bit of saying, you know what? In my notes on page 2, I wrote this quote by John Maxwell. Or I made this statistic on page 3. And the fact that you wrote it down will help you remember it when you least expect it. And for you all that don't know, a lot of times when you write things down, it's embedded into your subconscious. And you don't even know that you're not even thinking about it, and you start giving this presentation, you get into a flow, and all of a sudden, this quote in your head pops up. And you're like, man, I knew I wrote that, but I forgot about it. Just the fact that you wrote it down once, tell me, just once, goes a far way in remembering it. Practice ideas, not words. That comes back to doing the bullet points. If you say, for example, I'm going to talk about how do I walk my dog, practice that idea in your head. You don't have to practice every single word. Just get the concept out there in order for you to understand what you're doing. Prepare a mental draft. That just comes from thinking about the speech one whole time in your head. Think about where you're going to stand at. For example, in preparation for this speech, I thought about where was I going to stand. Was I going to stand right here the whole time in front of the PowerPoint so you guys couldn't see it? Was I going to stand right here next to Dan? I mean, I had to think about where I was going to stand at. And then I took that mental draft and I put it through my head. Make sure you get through the whole preparation of it. Don't just stop halfway. Now, there was one tactic that I was taught last year. When you break up your speech in different parts, let's say you have section 1, section 2, section 3, you have an intro, a conclusion, kind of break it up a little bit. One day, practice the first section. Next day, practice the third section. Another day, practice the second session. And then you start putting it together. And that way you start internalizing it more rather than memorizing it. Because we all know what happens when we just memorize ideas and thoughts and we get nervous. Yeah, we forget. Our mind goes completely blank. It's happened to me many of times. Sometimes happened to me since I've been standing up here. But I just chuckle in my head and I keep going. As you practice more, you will see gradual improvements. I can tell you, I noticed a difference in myself since I first joined Toastmasters up to this point. All the things that I can do now has just come from practice. I mean, every time I usually do a different speech when I come up here. However, I'm still using the same techniques and the strategies on making it better. For example, the power of the pause. I learned that back in 2016. And we typically say to use that instead of using filler words, such as so. You use that pause, so you're not saying that. You don't want to always say and we have a lot of times because we don't like hearing empty noises. We use those transitional words out of place. I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say so. You will get gradual improvements. You won't be 100%, but you'll gradually improve. A few other areas to consider. If you guys notice in my introduction, I made it fun. I made a few jokes in there, and because that breaks the ice for me mentally as well. You kind of write out a few tips, a few strategies in there, and that gives you another way to prepare. Once again, that's part of your practice. I'm practicing as I'm sitting there. I'm practicing as I'm walking up because now you are laughing. You guys are having a good time. It's a lot easier for me to come up here and start. And the great thing about introductions is that we can dictate how well they go as far as the words are. If you write a good introduction, you spend time on it, you practice it, when it comes your time to come speak, that can really change the momentum of your presentation. Prepare yourself physically. I was listening to an audiobook by Zig Ziglar, and it was called How to Close a Sale and the Secrets of Closing, something of that nature. And when I listened to it, he was an older man at the time. He was 65, 70. And he said one of the things that people don't realize is how much he works out. It ain't like he lifts weights, he doesn't do calisthenics, but he says, I just go run. I do cardio. And the point that really stood out to me was he was like, think about it. You want to go up there and give 30-minute presentations, 45-minute presentations. But if you're not prepared to do it, if your body's not physically ready for it, it makes it tough when stress kicks in. And that's what we see a lot of athletes do. They practice, they only play a game for what, an hour and a half most times, but they're practicing 8 hours a day because they're preparing their body physically for what's about to come. Because once that stress kicks in, it's a whole other ballgame. And that's something to think about when you're up here doing your presentations, your speeches. Are you physically preparing yourself? Are you staying in shape? Are you eating right? Are you getting enough sleep? Because all of that affects you. You drink the wrong thing before you come up here. If you drink too much coffee, you're running all over the place. But if you're tired, you're just kind of like, I gotta stand up here today. And that's the things to think about when you're preparing yourself physically. Have another mental rehearsal. You guys can tell how many times you see that in there. Keep preparing, keep running through different scenarios in your head. Start thinking about, well, what happens if I forget this point? What can I do to fill in? What happens if somebody's phone goes off when you're speaking? Can you overcome that? That's all the things you got to prepare for mentally. Conclusion, good luck happens when preparedness meets opportunity. as you prepare your speeches, your presentations, speaking in front of people, think about it. Rehearse in front of a camera. Record yourself on a phone. Write your speech out. Write your outline. Do all the little things to get you ahead of what's going on, to take you to this level over here. Because we're all going to start off on this level before we start preparing. And you're going to see that gradual improvement coming over the more you prepare, the more you rehearse your speech, and then you're able to get that final product. Thank you all. I enjoyed this.